your critical dates in your contract, when your inspection period expires, when your loan approval period expires, when you need to send your initial and additional deposits in, those dates are deadlines. They're not guidelines. They're not suggestions. If there are dates in your contract that obligate you to perform by a certain time, you must perform by that time. Otherwise, you are in breach of your contract. So that'd be the first thing. But we're dealing with deadlines, not guidelines. Um, the second thing, I would say, make sure that you are, you're really focusing on communicating with everybody involved in your transaction. Your title company, your attorney, your real estate agent, don't leave them in the dark. Have everyone's lines of communication open, because that's how you prevent a lot of the mishaps and you are able to address issues before they become issues. If you tell your title company the day before closing, actually, I changed my mind. I want to take title in my LLC, not in my personal name. Well, you know, that could cause an issue, because now we have to order a rework of the title commitment. And, there are certain things that we have to do differently. If you had told us that 2 weeks ago, we could have easily accounted for it and made sure that it was a seamless closing. So communication is huge. And I would say involve an attorney, and involve that attorney as early in the transaction as you possibly can. So a lot of times, for me, I get a contract sent to me before I had anything to do with it, and I'm told to close it. But I go through it and I think, wow, if this person had involved me earlier, I could have helped them write this contract differently to protect their interests so much better than what they gave to me. So,
hello and welcome to the Smart Business Owner Podcast with your host, Schubert.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Today we have Jesse Hupp. Jesse is a real estate lawyer here in Palm Beach County. Jesse, welcome to the show.
appreciate it, Schubert. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, of course. We love to bring value to the folks, and we had somebody that it was a contractor. That is a contractor on the show, and we have some real estate people. We never have real estate lawyers on the show. So today I'm going to take the opportunity to pick your brain to make sure that the people out there can learn a ton about you, and also when it comes to title work and real estate work. So why don't you take us from the beginning, how the whole thing gets started? How did you get started in law, and also where did you grow up?
Sure. So I'm from Jupiter. I grew up here, and growing up, my dad was actually an attorney, but he wasn't a real estate attorney. He did family law. So, basically it was divorce law, family law, estate planning, things of that nature. So I sort of followed in his footsteps. I knew, pretty much through high school and college that I wanted to be an attorney. I wasn't sure exactly what area I wanted to practice, but what I did know was that I wanted to do something transactional. I didn't want to be a litigator. I didn't want to fight with people in the courtroom.
Right.
I liked putting deals together, structuring things. That's more so the nature of my personality. So throughout law school and my first job at a firm in West Palm Beach, I took a liking to real estate and started practicing there. And I've pretty much never looked back since then.
Now, what was the influence on you wanted to become a lawyer because your dad was a lawyer as well, or you just find yourself a kid just was really good with, the kid that would give a speech in the classroom, standing in front of, the entire classroom, giving a whole 30, 40 minutes because you've seen kids like this and you're like, wow, this kid, he's probably going to become a lawyer one day or a politician. Was that the same for you or was it different?
I don't want to say I'm naturally, good at arguing or public speaking. I think, my wife would tell me maybe I'm good at arguing, but it's certainly
I'm sure
not,
she would.
it's not something, public speaking is not something I love to do naturally, or getting up in front of people and speaking. So it definitely was my dad. I like the lifestyle he was able, to live, and he's able to own his own business, being a solo practitioner, and have a lot of freedom of time. And that's something I've always valued, and something that I knew I wanted for myself in the future. So I would say that, combined with, my skills are in reading and writing. So that's a big part of being a lawyer. And kind of that's the way my life took me.
Yeah. When it comes to real estate, you mentioned that you were working at practice downtown while you were in law school, and that's somewhat how you realized that, hey, I don't want to be I don't want to be a litigator. I want to do transaction. Was there a moment where you say, hey, you know what, was crystal clear to you that's exactly what you wanted?
To be a transactional attorney?
Yes.
I think, I don't know if I can point to a defined moment, but I would say watching my dad practice family law, which is a lot of divorce law, and seeing people, good people at, some of the worst times of their life,
Right.
and just how spiteful they could be to each other and towards each other. And then as I went into law school, and as I was a summer associate at a law firm, and I worked a little bit on some litigation, and I saw the way that, our judicial system played out, I just knew it wasn't for me. So I wouldn't necessarily say there was a pivotal moment, just more so seeing it over time, seeing, how it played out, and making the decision from there.
I don't know if you ever watched that TV shows. I think it started on USA, and I think right now it's on Netflix. It's called Suits. Have you ever watched that TV
I
show?
have. I've seen a few episodes here or there, maybe the first season or so. So, yep, I've seen it.
Except that you're a real lawyer, unlike Michael Ross, the fake
Yeah,
lawyer.
yeah,
That was
Malcolm
not.
and Harvey, right,
That was,
right.
yeah.
Maybe one day I'll be like them. You never know. We'll see.
So one thing in that series, the reason I asked you about that was that uh, there was a scene where Lois, which was Harvey's partner, came to him and asked him to take a case, a family case for his sister. His sister was getting a divorce, and Lois, the sister, said, "Hey, I want Harvey," and Lois had to go to Harvey and ask Harvey to represent uh his sister. And Harvey was like, I don't want to do family law because there's lives involved. Life get destroyed when you're doing transaction. We talk about money, at the end of the day, corporate law, uh it's mostly about money. We settle the case and everybody goes home, nobody gets hurt. But when you're looking at a family, sometimes people get hurt. And I'm thinking that's probably your mindset, the reason why you didn't want to follow the exact footstep of your dad.
Yeah, that's definitely a part of it. I mean, there's truth to what he's saying there, in to what Lewis or Harvey, whatever you're saying, there's truth to what he said there. Especially when you're dealing with family type issues, like if you're in a contested probate, or if you are, if you're in a divorce, anytime where, you're working through those family issues, it can be really emotionally tolling, on everybody involved, whether that
Right.
be the family members themselves or the attorneys. But, to your point, for me, I would much rather deal with the business side and just a more transactional side. And I won't say that that doesn't get emotional too, because it absolutely does at times, but certainly less than, family law and certain probate
I'm
type.
sure because we're talking about one of the biggest investment people are gonna make in their lives, which is real estate, and that's what you deal with. And we're gonna get into that now. Is your dad still in practice, or is he retired now?
He still is in practice, but he's semi-retired, but still practicing. He mostly
Okay.
does small estate planning now. He doesn't do as much divorce law, so he's wound down a little bit, but he'll still practice.
Right, right. Yeah, it's the thing about being a lawyer. You can be 80 years old as long as the brain still works. You can still, practice.
Absolutely.
Maybe scale back a little bit. Now, as vice president of Console Title Company, which is your company, the company you work with, uh, what has been your journey as being in leadership with this company?
Well, we're small. I'm one of two attorneys there. And my leadership there is really just overseeing a lot of the files and a lot of not only the closings, but the buyer reps and seller reps that we do. Um, so that's mainly what it entails there.
Okay. And combining really your legal expertise with leadership, have you, you know, would you say that you have some inspiration as far as from a mentor that has inspired you to say, hey, maybe leadership is something that you might want to consider?
Sure. I think there's been a lot of people throughout my life who have made an impression on me one way or another. Some have been professionally. My dad definitely has throughout the years. The other attorney who I work with now, he certainly has been like a mentor for me, and I've learned, a lot about real estate and the practice of law in general through him. So those are certainly, two people who have, impressed upon me, and even some of the other firms and places I've been throughout my career too. I think my view is everyone has something they can teach you, no matter who
Right.
they are. So it's just, you've got to listen and pick up those little nuggets of learning if you can,
Right.
and keep moving forward.
One thing I said, you learn something every day. And it doesn't matter. It could be in your field, or if you're an attorney, it's going to be in the legal field. If you're in business, it could be in the business field. But I believe if you are a good learner, you can learn something every day. As you interacting with others, you're interacting with people. You just have to have an open mind. So when that one learning lessons shows up, or you hear it, so you can catch it. So that's well said.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Now, when it comes to title work, what are some of the misconceptions that people have about title company, and how does your company, Consular Title Company, address that?
So I would say it's two things mainly. There's two major misconceptions that I can think of off the top of my head. The first is realtors and, lay people, your everyday buyer and seller, don't know what title insurance is. So it's a
Right.
matter of just educating them and help them understand, what the product is, what they're getting when they purchase it. And the other misconception is, I think that sometimes the title world or title insurance has sort of a negative connotation. Like people might think that it's sort of a useless fee that they're paying at closing, but it doesn't really help them. When the reality is it's probably the single most important part of every real estate transaction. So those are some of the misconceptions or educational things that I have to do or things I need to fight through as I practice and as, we go through transactions. And I'm not sure I'm doing anything to combat those misconceptions other than educate people when they ask me about it.
Because I think the reasons are probably folks thinking, hey, what do I need that? What do I need to use a title company? What do I need a lawyer for this transaction? I just give the money, they give me my house. What do I need Jesse? That's probably one of the questions most of these people are asking.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the first questions I always get is, do I need title insurance? Do I have to purchase it? Is there a way to do it without it? But, the reality is, if you're buying a home on the free market, and by that I mean, if you're buying a home that a realtor or real estate agent has listed for sale to the public, you are going to get title insurance as a part of that transaction. There really is no way around it. And that's a good thing. You want title insurance because it's the only thing that's protecting you and ensuring that you're getting what you're paying for. If you're spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on a home, you want to make sure that title to that home is properly transferred into your name or your trust or your LLC. You want to make sure that you have coverage if, there are no heirs that come out of the woodwork and claim, make a title claim and say, no, this is my property, not your property, or an undiscovered lien or an easement, or there are so many different types of things that can happen and that I've seen throughout my career, that the thought of purchasing a property without title insurance would just be ridiculous. And anyone who invests in real estate would tell you the same thing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, think about it. You're spending millions, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and sometimes millions, that you're questioning spending a small fee to make sure that nobody gonna shows up and say, hey, by the way, you own my property, get off my property, and you're tied up in court for the next 2 or 3 years, and next thing you lose your kids because you didn't do your due diligence. You didn't do your homework. So
you're absolutely right, Schubert. And to build on what you're saying, a lot of people hear this and they think, all right, well, what are the chances that someone comes out of the woodwork, an heir of the prior seller, and says, this is my property, not yours?
Right.
But title insurance covers so much more than just that scenario. It could just be simply a mistake that the title company made when they were closing your transaction. So let's say they didn't, the deed wasn't witnessed or notarized properly and they recorded it. Well, in a technical sense and in a legal sense, that's a void deed. They didn't transfer title from the seller's name to the buyer's name. So what does that mean? You don't actually own the home that you think you do. Wow. And that you paid, $1 million for. So instead of you having to figure out what to do in that scenario, you just make a claim on your title insurance policy, which, by the way, is a one-time fee. It's not like other insurance forms that you're paying on a monthly basis or a yearly basis. It's paid one time during the transaction. It's one of the lowest fees that you'll incur in your transaction. And, it covers you for those items. So, I've seen it. I've personally dealt with, with cases plenty of times where title companies did make a mistake and people did have to make a claim on their title insurance policy. So, it's not something that never happens. People make claims all the time.
Right. So for those unfamiliar with the topic, why don't you break it down for us, the role of a title company, as the process work?
Sure. So basically, To make a long story short, what a title company does is they close real estate transactions and they deliver title of a property from a seller's name to the buyer's name. Now, there's a long process involved in that. So the title company might hold funds in escrow. If you're a buyer, you're going to place your deposit money with an escrow agent. Frequently, that's the title company holding closing the transaction. They're going to do a title search on the property and see, they're going to look at the past chain of title and see, okay, what was recorded in the public records here? What prior deeds are there? Easements, agreements, are there any liens? They're going to look at the chain of title and see, what you're working with and what needs to be fixed in order to transfer property from the seller to the buyer. They're going to order a lien search, which will, tell you if there's any outstanding liens on the property that need to be fixed prior to closing. And they also will draft all of the conveyance documents and closing documents that are necessary to transfer title. So I would say those are the major components and basic components. Every deal is a little bit different, and especially since I'm an attorney, I can work on deals that are a little bit more complex than, your average home sale. If there are components like seller financing, let's say, or any other type of financing, or post-occupancy agreements or pre-occupancy agreements, or, if net sales. There are so many different types of transactions that, if it's a title company that doesn't have an attorney involved, they really can't do the legal work necessary to do every part of that transaction. And what that means is you're going to have to go outside of that title company and find a lawyer outside of the transaction to assist you.
So that's a point I was just speaking here, and I was gonna ask you about that. Actually, I'm gonna ask you about that right now. We've seen a lot of title companies that are not lawyers; they're just people, title agents. They're just working in titles. Now, what is the major difference? I'm guessing what you just said, that's probably going to allude to that working with a firm, with a title company that have lawyers on staff, as opposed to just working with a title company that have title agents that are not lawyers. Why should a buyer should always consider, not necessarily they should do, but consider it, having a lawyer involved in a transaction, having it with the title company, probably the easiest way to get that involved? What would you say the main difference, and what should a buyer consider that? Or a seller, for that matter?
Sure. That's a great question. The main difference is sort of what I was talking about before. If you are working with a title company that doesn't have an in-house attorney or is not owned and operated by an attorney, you're really setting yourself up for failure, because so many things can happen in a real estate transaction that either requires an attorney to get involved and fix things, or just to draft things from the outset. So, if you, let's say, you are looking to buy a home, right? And you are working with a title company that doesn't have a lawyer on staff. And, you go through your walkthrough the day before closing and you see that a toilet had overflowed and damaged, the floor. That happened in one of my deals. That's why this is coming to mind. If you're working with a title company who doesn't have an attorney on staff, you have no one in the transaction ready to go to explain your rights to you, your contractual rights, of what you can do, of what you can negotiate, and kind of what your leverage is, and how you can fix the problem. So you have to go outside of your title company, find a lawyer who has the time to basically step in and negotiate on your behalf for a closing that in this case is supposed to happen tomorrow. And, a lot of attorneys are busy. They don't necessarily have the time to set their tomorrow's schedule aside and help you with your issue in that moment. But if you're working with a title company who has an attorney who's been on top of this transaction from contract through closing, is familiar with it, and understands the parties and kind of what everyone wants, it's a lot easier to work through those issues. So I would say the main differences are having someone who can give you legal advice and advocate zealously for you on your behalf, just step in when things do inevitably happen. And the other part is having an attorney who, if you bring an attorney on, an attorney-owned title company from the outset to help you negotiate your contract, you're just so much more protected than if you solely relied on your realtor. And it's, it's nothing against realtors. I love them. I work with them all the time. But, their strengths are not writing contractual provisions.
But they're not lawyers.
Their strengths are selling, right? That's what they do. They're salespeople and they're great at it. But, if you have a situation or a contract that's a little out of the ordinary, or there's something involved, like if the seller is an estate or a probate, or if you're doing seller financing, or if, there's something that's a little bit out of the ordinary, you pretty much have to have an attorney involved in that transaction, or you're just setting yourself up for failure.
And as you said, if you had somebody on staff or on your team, I may say, from the beginning, and it's a lot easier to, if there's a problem, to say, hey, go ahead and then handle that problem for me. Maybe they charge you a fee, maybe they don't, as opposed to on the 11th hour, try to find an attorney that will take your case after a lengthy explanation as far as what happened, because you have to fill them in as far as what's going on, why you need an attorney, and then, sign a retainer service, and get them to, request all the paperwork and to work on your case. I mean, it makes sense. I think, in my opinion, it does make sense to find firm to have lawyers involved, because it's kind of like you have 2 for 1.
You're absolutely right. You couldn't have said it any better. And the one thing I'll add is it's not any more expensive for you as a consumer to work with a title company that's attorney owned and operated or has an attorney on staff than it is if you just worked with a title company that doesn't have one. And that's because title insurance rates, basically the premium that you're paying for title insurance, it's set by the state of Florida, and it's based on the purchase price of the property and your loan amount if you're getting a mortgage. But I guess what I'm explaining is, since it's set based on the purchase price, every title company charges the same amount for title insurance. There's no difference between an attorney-owned title company and a non-attorney-owned title company. They're charging the same amount for title insurance. The only thing that could be different is a settlement fee, but even that, you're looking at maybe a $100 to $200 difference total. So it really makes no difference there. Now, if you're in a complicated situation that involves a lot of attorney time, then that's kind of outside the scope of title insurance itself, and you might have to pay, a lawyer hourly or a flat fee. But having that person on staff, ready to go, familiar with your transaction and kind of the course it's taken already, for all the reasons you said, is just so much more, valuable.
Yeah, 100%, because if you're going to pay the same fee anyway, you might as well, if you can get 2 for 1, why not? It sounds like a no-brainer to me.
It's a no-brainer.
When it comes to the difficulty, the troubles, like the liens or disputes, as an attorney, how do you address these things? Like, let's just, for example, you're doing the transactions, either they have a lien or a dispute on the property. How do you go about addressing these things with the buyer and the seller?
So it really depends on the nature of the actual issue we're talking about. Depending on what type of issue it is, it's always going to be different and it's going to require a different solution. So, let's say a contractor, let's say the seller is selling a property. They recently had work done to a property. They hired a general contractor or a subcontractor to do a new roof. And maybe that seller and the contractor are disputing, and the contractor says, "You owe me 50,000," and the seller said, "No, I was only supposed to owe you 40,000. Now I'm not paying you anything." And that contractor files a lien on the property, which happens all the time. That can have its own solutions to it. If it's a seller's homestead property, they might be able to file what's called a notice of homestead and basically relieve that lien for purposes of the sale. And they might be able to transfer that lien to a bond, whereby you can still sell and close on your sale, but it takes the lien off your property, holds funds in the court registry, and you can fight about that with the contractor sort of outside the scope of selling your house. So it's, with that type of title issue, that, those are two different ways that you can potentially solve it. But if it's, it depends on the issue. I mean, I've got one deal that, fingers crossed, closes tomorrow, where it's a $5 million home in Palm Beach County. The seller are 3 siblings, and the siblings' dad lives at the property. Of those siblings, only 2 want to sell, and the third doesn't. To complicate matters further, the dad, who lives in the house, doesn't want to leave. To complicate matters further, there is an HOA violation because they built a semi-permanent shed in a spot on the property they weren't supposed to. So these are 3 separate issues that, I have to step in and handle and negotiate. You have to build in contingencies in the contract from the outset. You have to help the client, mitigate and solve those issues as you get closer to closing. And, each one of those things involve a different solution. One is an ejectment action. One is a partition action. The other, the HOA violation, and, it can be any sorts of things, but it really depends on the type of title issue you're facing to say how you address it.
Yeah, it sounds like a complex case. And again,
Yes, it absolutely is.
imagine somebody have, that's the first, sale, and you find yourself in a situation like that with 3 siblings all tangled up, father-in-law living in the property, nobody wants to move, you want to sell, you want to take your money out. It's not a pretty situation.
No, it's not. And, it not every transaction has its thorns and its difficulties. So this one was particularly, difficult to navigate, but, we look like we're right about at the finish line. So hopefully it goes well.
That's good. That's good. Now, the title process, between start to finish can feel overwhelming for most people. What do you and your team do to make sure that it's a smooth process from start to finish?
That's a great question. It all comes down to communication. And that's the biggest differentiator, in my opinion, in this business is you need to, and what we do as a team is we introduce ourselves to all the parties involved. the listing agent, the buyer's agent, the buyer, the seller, as early as possible, by phone, by email. We want them to feel comfortable contacting us. So the first thing is establishing communication at the outset and then continuing that throughout the entirety of the transaction, letting them know. So what I like to do is, at a minimum, I provide weekly updates of exactly what we're doing in your transaction. So when title was ordered, when the lien search was ordered, when the HOA or property association estoppel was ordered. Did we have to get notices of commencement addressed with contractors? There are a lot of different things that I want to make sure that I just don't say nothing and then contact the client, a few days before closing and say, hey, wire your funds in, show up at this time, and let's close. You want to make sure that all parties feel comfortable talking to you, keep you up to date, and you can keep them up to date. So I think that's the main thing. And especially coming from an attorney, my goal is to be the best communicator as an attorney that people work with. I want them to say, wow, like this guy really took his time to contact me, to explain things to me in detail, to make me feel comfortable and answer my questions. And that's how I get a lot of fulfillment. But I think it also, it means a lot to the people on the other side who are in the transaction.
Yeah, I think people appreciate that too. For example, in my field, when I work with clients, before anything happens, I tell them up front, here's what's going to happen. So when it does happen, they feel like they were informed and they're more comfortable.
Sure.
The thing that most people are fearful of is the fear of the unknown. If they don't know what's coming, they're fearful. But if you keep them informed, like you do, you say, hey, this is what we have done. This is what we have done. It's not like say, hey, here's your date. Here's your closing date. Show up on the 30 days. And then you're just in the background doing everything. And they're probably wondering, okay, am I going to close on the 30th? Because since I signed that contract, it's cricket. I haven't heard anything from either, Jesse or my lawyer or whoever. But I think keeping them informed, I think it's a great strategy. So what would you say is the most challenging case you've worked on so far as title, counselor, lawyer? Tell us your most challenging cases and how did you use your skills as an attorney and leadership to solve it?
Oh man, that's really tough. I'd have to rack my brains for, the hundreds and hundreds of transactions and the amount of times I've done this. I don't know if I could say what the top most difficult was. The one I was just speaking about was certainly one of them where we had to, there was a lot of people to deal with and to negotiate with and issues to solve before closing. Let's see. I've had cases where, we've had to extend closings to get monkeys moved from a property. I've had closings where, I think I was speaking about this earlier, where it was a multi-million-dollar property. I can't remember where it was. I think it was in Palm Beach County, but it was an estate sale. So there was no one living at this property, right? But when they came to do some sort of inspection or something, after they had already been under contract for 30 days, they go in there, they see that the toilet had broken, it had overflowed, and water had been sitting there for, probably a week or two at least, just damaging the flooring, the baseboard, standing water sitting there. And you have to, negotiate those issues with the other side. I've had sometimes as simple as, I've had one transaction where it could not have been more smooth, but the walkthrough on the day before closing, the buyers go in there, and one of the air conditioning units stopped working. Well, the buyer says, I want you to replace the air conditioning unit. And the seller says, no, I want you to just buy the property. Then what do? You have to negotiate those issues. You have to use the contract as your guide. You have to do whatever it takes to figure it out. So on the residential side, those are the types of, deals that you work with. Commercial is a little different. The parties you work with, I don't want to say they're more sophisticated. They tend to have more experience, more real estate experience. So, they know what they're supposed to do. They're prepared. When issues come up, typically both sides are represented by counsel. So, we can step in and, negotiate amongst us and really figure out a good solution. So, they bring different challenges, but those are some of them that come to mind offhand.
Very good. Very well said. Now, when I go on social media these days, they always have some type of chat GPT lawyer. Have a lawyer for this much, have a lawyer for that much. How do you see AI and blockchain? Because I've seen blockchain is becoming, very popular in real estate as well. How do you see these two factors play a role in shaping the real estate closing industry or title search? And if these are these things that you use in your practice?
It's a really good question. I probably, to be completely honest with you, need to learn more about the blockchain industry to give you a better answer. I've read some material out there that says we might be able to more efficiently and more accurately store title records in the blockchain than we could in the clerk's office and our indexes as we do now. Whether that's actually the case, I don't know. But yeah, I've definitely heard some rumblings about trying to push that to improve our industry. I think, AI in general, I think it affects everything from, contract drafting to just general, the intelligence of the systems that we work with, whether that's our closing software, whether that's, Zillow or property aggregation software. I think it's AI, I'm sure will have some sort of effect, but I'm certainly not an expert in that area, and I can't give you a great answer of exactly how it'll affect it.
I was having a conversation with a realtor yesterday, actually, and he said that there was a buyer that was selling a property, and he asked the buyer for a contract, and the buyer sent him the paperwork, and he looked at it. It looks a little funny. And he asked him, "Did you send me a contract, a ChatGPT contract?" And the buyer was like, "Yeah, I did." He's like, "No, man, come on, call a real lawyer, because I can tell that's not a real one, because he sees his contracts every day."
It is so easy to tell. Usually for contracts, we're using the as-is form FAR contract, so we're seeing the same thing over and over. But I have had clients come to me and say, I don't want you to draft an operating agreement for my LLC. I want you to use this one that I have and just revise it. And it's clearly some sort of, AI like ChatGPT operating agreement. And I just have to tell them, like, look, it's a lot faster for me to use my form and edit it to fit your entity than it is to take, the garbage that you just handed me and try to revise it and make it better. So I'm right there with you. There's us lawyers, we have great forms. We've been doing this for a long time. It's going to be more cost effective for a consumer to just go straight to a lawyer than it is to, try to work with ChatGPT and risk anything that spits out.
Do you see ChatGPT as a as a threat to your industry? You think that's gonna take away some jobs? Because when you're looking at the stats, when it comes to the amount of jobs AI gonna phase out, the numbers, it doesn't look too good. You're looking at over 60% of the jobs that are humans are currently performing will be phased out because of AI. Do you see that as a threat uh, for lawyers or for the legal industry?
Potentially, it could be. And again, I'm no expert in this subject, but there are definitely categories or certain things. There are things that lawyers do or categories of certain types of lawyers that would be more affected than others. There are even, for example, if you take a big law firm, right, who, they're dealing with large cases and they have, first and second year associates who are basically combing through thousands and thousands of documents and searching for, you know, they're basically trying to flag documents to say one's important and one is not. This one is material to our case, this one is not.
Right?
AI could probably do that more efficiently and faster than a human can. So I would say yes. I think AI is certainly a threat to certain types of lawyers. Now, I think a lot of it's going to depend on how good can AI get, how accurate can it be? But to say it's not, as an attorney, to sit here and say that it's not a threat or it couldn't be, I think that would just be naive.
Yeah, I agree with you because now they're talking about AGI. Now we're talking about AI. Now the next new thing is AGI, artificial general intelligence. And they're making that thing AGI. That's a new thing, artificial general intelligence. So where a machine can be more intelligent or way more smarter than a human,
Yeah.
because they have those models that can be trained on laws, can be trained on finance, can be trained on mathematics. So usually, humans, we tend to have specialties, and so they have those multi-model that can be trained on different industry, and that's what they're talking about here. And I think you're right. It could become a threat for a lot of industry, not the law, not just the law. What would you say the top three things buyers and sellers should know when it comes to title work that needs to be done? And any pitfalls that you have seen, over the years being, in that field?
Wow. That I could probably talk about this for an hour. But if I had to narrow this down to three things, I'll try to keep it basic. The first I would say is your critical dates in your contract, when your inspection period expires, when your loan approval period expires, when you need to send your initial and additional deposits in. Those dates are deadlines. They're not guidelines. They're not suggestions. If there are dates in your contract that obligate you to perform by a certain time, you must perform by that time. Otherwise, you are in breach of your contract. So that'd be the first thing. But we're dealing with deadlines, not guidelines. The second thing, I would say, make sure that you're really focusing on communicating with everybody involved in your transaction. Your title company, your attorney, your real estate agent, don't leave them in the dark. Have everyone's lines of communication open, because that's how you prevent a lot of the mishaps and you are able to address issues before they become issues. If you tell your title company the day before closing, actually, I changed my mind. I want to take title in my LLC, not in my personal name. Well, you know, that could cause an issue, because now we have to order a rework of the title commitment. And, there are certain things that we have to do differently. If you had told us that 2 weeks ago, we could have easily accounted for it and made sure that it was a seamless closing. So communication is huge. And I would say involve an attorney and involve that attorney as early in the transaction as you possibly can. So a lot of times, for me, I get a contract sent to me before I had anything to do with it, and I'm told to close it. But I go through it and I think, wow, if this person had involved me earlier, I could have helped them write this contract differently to protect their interests so much better than what they gave to me. So, involve your
So
attorney
you've
early.
seen cases where people leave money on the table or being vulnerable to
Absolutely.
lawsuits.
Yeah, or just, I have language that I add to contracts that basically it prevents title companies from overcharging you fees that they're not really technically supposed to charge you. I have language that obligates the seller to close, certain permit issues before closing, where the standard contract as it stands doesn't have that language. So, there's that's just two simple things right there that if you had contacted me earlier, I could have added those things in there for you, saved you money, and prevented any potential permit issues which come up all the time.
Well said. What about realtors? For example, let's say a realtor is watching us today or listening to the podcast, and they'll say, okay, well, I've been working with my tower company and we never have any problems. They probably never have, but the problem probably will happen at some point in the future. What advice would you give those realtors as far as how to make sure that they have a smooth process from start to finish?
I would say, first and foremost, you should work with a title company that is attorney owned and operated or has attorneys on staff. Whether that's my title company or another, I think that's, you're going to save yourself so many headaches in the future if you do that. And second, communication. It really all comes down to communication. That's my best advice. Try to, I would say, partner with somebody or a title company or a law firm that you can rely on and communicate with often. So, for me, the agents that work with me, they have my cell number. If they're putting a contract together that has something that's a little different or awkward or an unusual provision, I'm not going to charge them for my advice. I'm going to help them make sure that it's appropriately drafted and that, the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. And after that, I'm there throughout the whole transaction. I want to be there, for you as a realtor and for your clients as well, and provide unparalleled service. So that's what I would say. I would say, be a good communicator on your end and work with other professionals who are really good communicators on their end as well.
I agree. I believe that everybody should hire professionals to help them with the problems. If you're a plumber, don't try to solve your legal problems. Hire an attorney. If you're an attorney, don't try to fix your plumbing. Call the
That's
plumbing
right.
company.
And I would.
I read this book called "Buy Back Your Time." The guy's it's a motivational speaker. His name is Dan Martell. He spoke in his book that people or entrepreneurs should buy back their time. And the way you do that is to stay in your lane, stay within your circle of competence. And anything that you don't know how to do well, you don't enjoy doing, or you're not an expert, you delegate that. It could be within your own company, or it could be you hire somebody outside of your company or professional firm to get it done, as opposed to try to play lawyer or try to play, plumber.
Absolutely. I haven't read that book, but I could not agree more. And I think, adopting a mindset like that, it frees you up to focus on the things that you're good at or the things that you want to do.
Yeah.
So, I couldn't agree more.
Now, what if somebody already, let's just say from somebody's listening to that conversation now or watching us, they already hired a title company. Do you still recommend them to hire a lawyer? Let's just say the title company is not lawyer owned. Do you still recommend them to hire a lawyer to protect their interests?
Yes. So, and I think a better way to explain this is when let's take Palm Beach County, for example, since we're both in Palm Beach County. In Palm Beach County, typically by custom, the seller picks the title company that closes the transaction. And by doing that, the seller pays for the buyer's owner's title insurance policy. Now, just because they're doing that, that title company or that law firm closing the transaction doesn't represent the buyer. They're not advocating for the buyer. If there's an issue that comes up, they can't represent the buyer. So a big piece of my business is representing buyers in Palm Beach County where the seller picks the title company, because now I'm providing them with their own representation from contract through closing. And, they have someone on their side throughout the transaction. So I would say, to answer your question, yes, you should still hire an attorney to represent you. Certainly isn't required in Florida, but it's absolutely recommended.
Yeah. I've seen realtor all the time. They say, hey, we can just have that contract here for a while. I can just figure it out. You don't need a lawyer. But I agree with you. If you're making such a big investment, spending a few $100, to protect your interests is the least you can do. In this case, what if somebody's is selling or buying a property and they run into some trouble, either lien, whatever the case may be? What's the best course of action should they do? I mean, should they take? Should they go ahead and hire a lawyer, or should they get counsel? What would you say is the best course of action? Somebody's doing a real estate transactions and they run into some troubles.
The short answer is find a good real estate attorney and hire that person. The reality is, real estate attorneys, we do this hundreds of times a year, right? People might buy a house a few times in their lifetime. I do this, I'm doing this multiple times a week, hundreds of times a year. But real estate attorneys are so familiar with this process. We're experts in this area. So when you face an issue like that, one, we're the people who are best suited to provide you with the proper advice or the right course of action to take to solve it. But to be honest with you, depending on the type of issue, you might have no choice but to hire an attorney. So it really might not even be, your choice to make. You might have to hire someone to handle the issue.
How do you educate your partners? For example, realtors that you do business with, clients. Do you educate them to make sure that they understand the process? How do you do that?
I do. So realtors that work with me, what I like to do, if I see something come up that I think is interesting or new, or that I think someone might be able to benefit from, I just try to educate those people. I'll send them forms or contract language or just a quick email saying, hey, I saw this come up the other day. If this ever happens to you, this is what you should do. I try to, to spread my knowledge and give it to realtors so that they can, perform their best for their clients. So that's pretty much what I do.
It's good, man. It's very good. Very good. Now let's shift gear a little bit. Let's talk about mindset and motivations, because this show is about entrepreneurs. And as a realtor, I mean, as a lawyer, and in leadership, you're an entrepreneur. What would you say is one advice you receive from a mentor that has shaped who you are today, and that you live by on a day by day, on a daily basis?
It's a great question. I would say professionally and in the title and real estate industry, um, some advice that was given to me is sometimes you've got to play outside your role. You might be a quarterback, but you might have to play running back. You might have to play outside linebacker. And what I mean by that is just because something might not necessarily be your job doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. At the end of the day, your job is to get the ball into the end zone. Your job is to get the transaction closed. So I'm a lawyer, but if the only thing that is holding up a deal is, the HOA certificate of approval can't be notarized, and I've got the time to drive down to the HOA and notarize it for them, I'm going to do it. Does a lawyer, is that in the job description? Not necessarily, but, the advice is your job is to get the job done by whatever means necessary. So whatever role you have to play to do that and ensure seamless closing, that's what you got to do.
I read a book a while back. Can't remember the title, but there was a chapter in that book that stated that you have to go 1 mile, just 1 more miles. As opposed, if you have to run 5, you do 6. You have to do 10, you do 11. In essence, that's what you just said here, and I agree with you 100%. You've seen that so many times: quarterbacks running, quarterbacks tackling. It's not their job, but they're just doing whatever it takes for them to win. And I'm guessing it's the same thing in the law industry, and successful mindset for successful entrepreneurs. Now, if you could go back, if anything, would you change? If I give you, a magic wand and say, Jesse, you can go back and change something, what would it be?
I'm not sure I have a good answer for that. I truly think all of my, every part of my journey thus far, the good, the bad, everything involved has led me to where I am now. So I don't know if I would change anything. I truly think that every part of everyone's journey is meant so that they can learn something in particular, a little bit like you were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, right? I mean, we all have something to learn on a day-to-day basis. So, nothing really jumps out to me that I would change. I truly am grateful for every part of my journey and everything it's taught me.
What would you say is gets you out of bed on a daily basis? Because as an entrepreneur, as a lawyer, the world is tough. Sometimes people want to crawl into the bed and stay there and never get out of,
Sure.
What would you say about one thing that motivates you to get out there and take on the world on day by day, on a daily basis?
I guess it's really, two things for me. I would say the first thing is what I do is genuinely really fulfilling for me. No one likes 100% of everything that they do on a day-to-day basis, but generally speaking, I love what I do. It's really fulfilling. I love helping a first-time home buyer close on their first home. I like helping people, who are interested in investing in real estate close on their first rental property, or sell a property and make a profit. No matter how big or small the deal is, I find it really fulfilling. And that's a big part of, getting out of bed every day, like you're saying.
So
I would
loving what
say
you
the
do kind
second,
of helps a little bit, sounds like.
yeah, absolutely. And I'd say the second thing is, I come from a sports background. I'm naturally pretty competitive. I really believe that, I'm happy when I'm pushing myself and I feel like I'm striving to progress and be a better person for the people around me, for myself, for, my friends and family. So, naturally, I'm pretty intrinsically motivated, and, I like to push myself to be better than I was yesterday.
So basically what you're saying, your motivation come from within, not from
Um,
outside influences.
yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, my wife, my family, I've got, great people around me um, who push me and who I like to strive for, but, also, just myself too. I'm pretty intrinsically motivated.
Because, a lot of time people will get motivated by some outside stimulus. But sometimes those motivations don't last. It fades away pretty quick because as soon as you remove that stimulus or that stimuli, the motivation is gone. For example, if you're taking a sheep, for example, or a sheep would run if he's getting chased by a lion or by a tiger. But as soon as the lion stops chasing the gazelle or the sheep, it stops.
Sure.
But the lion, his motivation comes from within because he's hungry. He needs to eat, otherwise he's gonna die. So that's kind of what you said here, intrinsically motivated. So I like that. I never heard of that one before, that put it that way, but I like that one.
Sure. No, yeah, definitely.
So what's your definition of success? In other words, what's your DOS? A lot of time different entrepreneurs have different definitions for different things. And when it comes to success, people see it differently. It all depends on who you're talking to. So what success means to you, Jesse?
Um, well, professionally, I would say it means, I try to be less focused on the result and more focused on just, did I put forth my best effort that day based on, the capacity that I had? Was I not lazy? Did I put forth my best effort? And, did I push myself to grow and learn? I think if I can do those things on a day-to-day basis, no matter what the results are, that's what success looks like on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, if somebody's young kid looking at you here, say, "Hey, I want to become Jesse when I grow up." What advice would you have for them? Not only as far as going to law school and becoming a real estate lawyer and also becoming successful. What advice would you have for that young 20-year-old, in college right now doing undergrad?
I would say two things. One is work hard, because you've got to work hard to achieve whatever goals it is that, you have for yourself in your life. But two, don't be scared to fail. I think so many people limit themselves by being scared to fail or being scared about what other people might think about them, when in reality, you have to push through that if you want to achieve things worth achieving.
Well said, man. Now, Jesse, I've met you through PRE. You and I think we joined almost around the same time. And has been the experience for you? PRE, for those listening, stand for Professional Referral Network. It's a referral group that's where I met Jesse. So talk to us about how the experience been with the referral group, and has it been a success so far?
Sure. So For me, it has been a success, personally and professionally. I mean, I've met a lot of great people there, such as yourself. We have a really great, tight knit group. But from a professional perspective, I mean, I've certainly gotten a few real estate deals out of it, or clients and referrals that I can help out. So it's been great for me, business wise. So, I've really enjoyed it.
Is there any professional within the Jupiter area listening or watching that podcast on YouTube or listening on Spotify? Would you recommend the Professional Referral Network for them to join?
Oh, I absolutely. I think if you're an entrepreneur who's looking to grow your business, being in referral groups like this is invaluable. And I highly recommend coming by, having a breakfast with us, seeing what we're about, and seeing if it'd be a good fit for you.
Yeah. And breakfast is free too, right?
Yep. There you go. That's right.
Yeah. Today was, I really enjoyed this conversation today, Jesse. Just so you know, I think
Me too.
it was a great conversation. You shared a ton of information with us. If somebody want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
I would say either email me or call me. My phone's always open. You can look me up, on my website. It's counselorstitlecode.com. And all my contact information is there. So, feel free to reach out if you have a real estate question, or you think I can help you with a closing, or you just generally need some advice. I'm always happy to help out.
Any big thing in the horizon for you for 2025? We should keep an eye out for.
I'm not 100% settled on this yet, but I've been thinking about sharing real estate content, maybe on Instagram, just from a lawyer's perspective. So, I am
great.
I've never done anything like that, but I think it could be beneficial for a lot of people out there. So, I would say, look out for that within the next month or two. I'll probably be on Instagram and trying to spread some sort of, content and knowledge of the real estate industry and just everything I know.
That'd be great. That's is that your New Year's resolution?
Yes, it is. I needed to find some other, space like that to be creative and try to find a new, I needed to start something new. So that was.
That's awesome, man. Well, Jesse, as I said, it was an awesome conversation where I've learned a ton. I hope the audience learned a ton as well. Thanks for being here, man. Appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely, Schubert. You're the man. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Smart Business Owner Podcast. See you in the next episode.